Welcome to Messy Liberation, the podcast that dives deep into feminism, business, and personal growth. I'm Becky Mollenkamp.
And I'm Taina Brown. Get ready for another messy conversation through the eyes of two intersectional feminist coaches.
Let's get messy. Hi, Taina.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. You're going to the pool?
Well, you make it sound like that's fun, but I'm going to the pool with 6 9-year-old boys and only me. So would you call that fun?
No, I would not call that fun. I would call that less than fun.
It just kept growing. And now I'm basically hosting a pool party by myself.
Yeah.
But it's okay because that way I know that they will just do their thing together. It relieves some. It actually makes it a little better, but it's not. I wouldn't call it fun. But hey, such is the life of a summer parent.
Yeah. I keep telling Mello we need to make friends with some wealthy prick up here in Maryland so we have access to a boat or
they say the 2 people that you want to have in your life is 3. Someone who owns a boat, someone who owns a pool, and a lawyer. Those are the 3 friends you're supposed to have in your life.
And a mechanic.
Well, a mechanic is also good. You're right. Yeah. But those are the things you don't necessarily like, especially the boat and the pool. It's because you don't want to own those.
Yeah.
It's just too much work.
Expensive. That's what the one thing I miss about apartment living is having access to a pool.
Well, we have a neighborhood pool, but it used to be the neighborhood's pool. So only the neighbors could, your HOA dues got you access.
Mm-hmm.
They switched it because the neighborhood had gotten so old, there weren't enough kids. People weren't joining. It was falling into disrepair. So now it's a public pool, a public private pool, meaning it's private. They have limited memberships, but anyone could buy one.
Okay.
So it's 190 families that joined, and it's now selling out.
Wow. They have city pools here.
Yeah, we have those too.
Which, I grew up with city pools in New York. We would always be at the pool. But now as an adult, when I think about a city pool, I'm like, that's disgusting.
Well, not only disgusting, it's just I don't want to deal with it. They're often so crowded. And as an adult, full of kids. Then again, so is this neighborhood pool. But at least it's smaller. We know everybody. It's nice. My kid has a lot of friends up there. Today, the ones I'm bringing, they're all the kids that are going are pool members. So I'm just taking them up there, but they're already all members. So anyway, probably nobody wants to hear about this. What do you want to talk about? What's going on in the world that you have identified as a thing to discuss? And move over because I'm afraid you may not be fully centered on our up and down. You got to try me in the center for when I do YouTube shorts. Hey, everybody, there's the tech stuff we're talking about. I'm not editing it out because life's too short for that. So what's going on for you?
Melo's traveling this week, and I am taking care of the dogs by myself, so I'm not sleeping. So that's what's going on with me. I'm fucking tired.
I'm tired also, but it feels more like a metaphysical tired.
Like you feel it in your bones and your soul and your spirit.
Just it all feels overwhelming right now. The world. We went to the No Kings protest.
It was
my son's first protest, which was very cool. He was such a rule follower. I love him, but he has a lot of me in him. I could be a rule follower. And his biggest thing was is this legal, Mom? And I said, it's legal. And he's like, okay, then I'll go. But he was so nervous leading up to it. I don't even know where it's sinking in because I haven't talked about the LA stuff that's going on or, much. But he does hear me rant and rave a little bit about the current administration and things. And I think he just was really nervous of are we going to get in trouble for doing this? He was real nervous when we got there. It was pretty crowded. He was like, it's a lot of people. It felt overwhelming, which is great that we had thousands of people show up. And I was in a red district, a 60-40 Trump district in Missouri. So we went outside of where we live, which was the opposite of that. I live in a 60-40 blue district of St. Louis County, which other than in the city is about as blue as Missouri gets. And this was the opposite of that. It was far more Trump territory. And to see that many people there was amazing. And it wasn't the nicest of days. It was really humid, but there were thousands of people. And he got into it after a while. And he liked hearing the horns honking and clocking how many people were flipping us off. Just sort of noticing all of that. And it was really interesting. There were almost no young kids there. There were a lot of teenage and up. I've been to a lot of protests in my time. I've been kind of that kind of person who likes to go to these kinds of things and show up in this way. And usually there's more children. And I did think that was interesting because I even had people comment on oh, wow, it's really awesome that you brought your kid here. It's brave. And I'm like, I don't want to teach him that we allow the fears that they're creating to stop us from showing up. Does that mean I'm not going to have my head on a swivel? Of course not. Does it mean I'm not going to be like arms around him and watching and thinking about like, ooh, who could ram their car into this or whatever? Of course, all of that was there. But I also don't want him, especially as a potential, a future white man, to learn that, hey, fear wins and I don't show up when there's a potential cost to me, right? And I do feel like that was a good lesson for him. So it was really good. It was a nice, and my husband went and his sister went. And it was the first time I think either of them had ever been to any kind of protest. My son's first protest. I showed up to a call yesterday where we were talking about it. Quite a few older white women. It was their first time ever going to a protest. So I do think that speaks to something that this event, which brought out millions compared to his sad little, his King's parade, which had very few people. I do think it says something that it's bringing out new people. It's energizing new people. People that it's not just the hardcore folks like me who've, give me a rally, I'll be there.
Yeah.
People who are like, I don't do this. I might even be scared to do this, which is a refrain I heard quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I need to do this. Yeah. And I think that's big.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is big. That is big. And I don't know if we mentioned it, but we're talking about the No Kings protests over, I was going to say July 4th weekend, but it's still fucking June.
It's still June. And whenever somebody says we still have 3.5 years left on this administration, I can't fathom it because I feel like we are aging. Who's that old guy that fell asleep and he woke up and he was like Rip Van Winkle or whatever? Like, I feel like, don't you know that story? I don't know. Well, anyway, I feel like every month is already 3 years. Like it feels like we've already been through 6 years of this administration. We're at 6 months. Like the idea of 3.5 more years just hurts me to my core.
Yeah. Yeah.
So no, it is only June. It was the day of his
birthday
presidential birthday, the 250th anniversary of the Army, which we all know it was just him wanting to be an emperor, a king with his, his king, what's his name? Kim Jong-un moment. Did you see any of the footage of it?
A few things on social media. I was like,
But did they, come on, did you not get any little bit of pleasure of watching him looking so sad and sullen like a little child? Like, I threw a birthday party and nobody came. And I don't get like.
I saw a TikTok where the caption was like, when you spend $45 million on your birthday party, and then it cut to like Elon, like clips of him and Elon together. And it was like, and he doesn't show up.
I saw one that was that same like birthday party. And it was a famous like, meme of a dog's birthday party where they threw this birthday party for their dog and none of the other dogs showed up, and then they showed the dog on the couch looking all sad next to Trump. I mean, the memes and things were golden. And just the way that was hammered home that like he tried to do this, and America largely said, no, we don't do this here. This is not how we want to be.
Yeah.
It did give me some hope. And that's what my husband and sister-in-law both said, was like, and I knew that would help them because my sister-in-law in particular has been really like struggling with what's going on and just the overwhelm of it. And I said, the best thing about these protests is it renews your faith a little.
Yeah. You realize you start to feel,
you start to feel like you're, and it's crazy making, right? Like you start to think, wait a minute, is this what the world, like everyone actually wants this? Am I the only one who's still sane? And then you go and you're reminded like, no, they may be louder. They may be in more positions of power, but they're not the majority. Like there are many of us who are saying no.
Yeah. Cause I mean, what we're enduring is like institutional gaslighting, right? So if you're just at home by yourself, like not really plugged in, not really talking to other people, not really doing anything besides like being in panic mode and, drenched in your anxiety, then it does feel like I'm going crazy. Like I'm the only one who's feeling this way. And I mean, that's the truth with a lot of things, once you start to get around people and talk about it, you realize, oh, this is actually, one, it's bigger than me, but also like, I'm not alone here. Like other people are also feeling this. I have a question though, because like, and this just piqued my curiosity because you talked about G-Man. I'm going to call him G-Man.
Yeah, my kid.
Yeah, your kid, his first protest, and asking, is this legal, and all of that. And I know there's like a big conversation about there have been a lot of things throughout history that were legal that were not right. Right. How do you broach that conversation as a parent?
It is such a challenge, and I don't do a great job of it. I'll be honest. This is a place where I know I struggle because I sent him to a traditional public school, and public schools are meant to, their reason for existing
is assimilation. Yeah,
absolutely. It is to create good future citizens
Yeah.
And what that means is obedient citizens who will become workers. It is creating cogs for the wheel, right? That is all schools are meant to do. They are not like their primary
That's why schools
function.
were created.
Exactly. They weren't created
of the Industrial Revolution
to educate and make children smart and curious and none of that. It's to make kids
complacent,
quote unquote citizens, which by what that means is exactly that, rule followers, people who know how to show up and clock in at 9 and leave at 5 and do their work, or back then clock in at 6 and leave at 6 or whatever, go into the coal mines and do the thing without complaining, because they learn how to listen, respect authority, and listen means listen without questioning.
Yeah.
Right.
Not watch the clock.
Right. Schools are very much about that. And it's very hard to raise a child to try and teach them, no, we want you to question authority. And also you have to function inside of the school. You have to function inside of society. You have to function inside of our house. Like, there are times it is not impossible. I know people who do it. It is harder. It is so much harder. And I don't always do the best job of it. I'm trying. I try very hard to not ever use the because I said so with my parenting. I try to explain reasoning, try to get him involved in those conversations. But I drop that ball. I definitely tell him to listen to his teachers, right? Instead of always questioning his teachers, because I also am a rule follower myself, because I was very deeply conditioned to be. So I don't do the best job of that. Where I feel like I do a better job is having him question systems, like the bigger piece of like why, interrogating why are things unfair? Why are certain, why am I allowed to behave this way and others can't, or whatever those things are when he's existing inside of the system. Yeah. I also want him to be, I don't want him to be the trouble kid. I don't want him to be getting in trouble. And I know that inside that system, if he doesn't show up in the way that's expected, that will be problematic for him, right? Like, there's consequences to that. So it's challenging. This is the stuff that's always so hard as a parent, is like that balance between, again, with raising a boy, I want to raise an emotionally intelligent, sensitive child who cares about others and all of that. And I don't want him to get beat up.
Yeah.
So how do I, like, finding that balance of how do you do that and also exist inside of a world where a lot of parents aren't doing that same thing. Yeah. And there is a real consequence of potentially being beat up if you're a boy who starts crying for no reason in 8th grade, right? Like, do I want him to be able to? Yes. And I do worry about that reality. And though, like, I don't have good answers for it, because I think there is an ideal and I love the ideal. And then there's the real world, and trying to navigate that. That's this messy stuff, right?
Yeah. There's definitely a gap between the ideal and the reality. Sometimes I think the gap is bigger, depending on, obviously depending on like situational context. I think obviously I'm not a parent. I have worked a lot with children, and I think sometimes because I said so is warranted, but I think the reframe of that could potentially be not because I said so, but I need you to trust me right now. This doesn't make sense, and maybe it's not right at the end of the day, but like, it's right now. And so, like, trust that I have like your best interests at heart or whatever. And I think
we go back to the refrain. Since he was a baby, we have always said, what's our number one job? And he's always learned our number one job is to keep him safe. We use the language to keep us safe. And that is our number one job. And then we tell him our number 2 job is to love you. But above even that, it's to keep you safe. That is our job as parents, to make sure that you survive, right?
Yeah.
We want to love you, but sometimes we have to show up in a way that might feel a little harsh to him. Because it
doesn't feel like love.
Yeah. And we have to remind him, we love you, but the number one job is keeping you safe. And so if there's a moment where you're about to get run over by a car and I scream at you, I don't want to scream at you. That's not how I show up as a parent. That may not feel loving, but in that moment, my need for you to be safe outweighs the need for loving you. And we come back to that a lot when there's times where he'll question this, why, because they get to that age. And sometimes instead of it being because I said so, we just always remind him, what's our number one job? And he knows that now. He always rolls like, keep me safe. And this is one of those times where we're older and we know that this is a safety issue. And you may not be able to see that yet, but we do. And so we have to keep you safe. And so it may not make sense to you, but that's our number one job. So we have to do it. It doesn't always make it better, but I do feel like contextualizing things in that way is helpful.
Yeah. How, you said you've seen people do it for not you've seen people do. You said something about
it just requires more time, I think. The shorthand is, it's easier just to say, because I said so, quit asking, go, right? Like that is easier when you can just shut down a conversation with a kid. And as parents, we can assert our authority in that way, or we can make them afraid. Ultimately, I think that's what we're doing, right? It's like the authority, the respect you're commanding is really just fear. So you can use that, and parents do, and it is easier than to sit down and have a whole conversation where it's like, and my shorthand, again, a lot of times we go to the safety or something like that, where we will sort of still be, it's kind of this because we said so, but in a way that we hope contextualizes it for him to understand a little more of the why. But I've seen parenting that's more of this gentle parenting that I respect, I just don't have patience for, which is, let's sit down and have a conversation. Why do you think that might be?
Yeah.
What do you think could happen? You know, what's your input? Like getting this whole dialogue, which there are times when we do that, right? For sure. There's also times where I don't have the patience and I just can't. I can't.
You don't have the time all the time for that.
Yeah. It takes a lot more time to show up in that way. And I would love to be able to say I'm the kind of parent who shows up 100% that way. And I don't. There are times where it's just like, no, because we have to keep you safe and that's it. And the conversation ends here, right? Like, it's not always ideal, but it is what it is. Like parenting is tough fucking shit. It is really the hardest job that anyone can ever do.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw a TikTok a few days ago, and it was, I forgot what the name of the podcast was. It was like Trash Talk Today or Trash News Today or something. I don't remember. But and I don't know who this person was that was being interviewed, but I think they're a comedian, maybe, or an actress, like an indie actress. I don't know. But she was saying that she's anti-mothering. And it was two hosts and her, and they asked her, are you anti-child or anti-mothering? And then like she thought about it. She was like, no, I'm anti-mothering, because way back when there was this kind of idea that like, you just accidentally had kids and you just figured it out. And you're just like, oh, we got kids, we'll make it work, we'll figure it out or whatever. But like parenting is and mothering, but in particular parenting, or in general parenting, like it actually takes a lot more effort than that. And her argument was like that premise, like that approach of like, oh, we'll just figure it out as we go along, is like why we have assholes today who have the emotional capacity of a teaspoon, you know, who don't know how to connect with people, and who are, you know, just like hateful and selfish and can't think of anybody outside of themselves.
Well, I just had a conversation with a client, and we both have baby boomer parents, which most Gen X people do. And some older millennials have Gen X parents, right? Or have baby boomer parents. And talking about these differences in parenting. And it's like the greatest generation, the one before the baby boomers. And even before that, you know, parenting has evolved from this, like, it was not even necessarily accidental, although to some degree, because there wasn't family planning as we know it now. But a lot of it was intentional in that we need to populate our farm with workers. And the way we do that, especially now that we don't have slavery, right? We can no longer
have kids,
humans, right? We're going to take free labor from children, right? We used to enslave people and steal their labor. Now we'll just have children and steal their labor, or both, right? Have happened over time. And as so that's a very different style of modeling. It was really the parents, or the different style of parenting. The parents were the school teacher, the enforcer, the rule. They were your boss.
Yeah.
It wasn't about necessarily love.
It wasn't about family and connection and community.
I mean, that could exist.
I mean, I think that could have been a part of it, but that wasn't the primary.
For some families, that was very much a part of it, right? But there was definitely, like, for a lot of people, family wasn't about family in the way we think of it. It was about work, right? It was practical, and children were there to serve a practical purpose. They weren't there to like fulfill you and enrich your life. And like, no, it's just like, I need people to work. I need hands, and I'm getting older. Somebody's got to take care of this farm. Here we go. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's a very different way of showing up with people. And then like it started to evolve where there was more of this like attachment to children and caring for them, and also realizing like, they're not going to be workers. So if we're having kids, what are they going to do? And trying to shepherd them towards something. Then it feels like it shifted almost more into this like educational kind of role, where it's still less emotional, but more about, I'm here to help guide you into something and make sure that you live a life. But it's not necessarily about like our bond per se, or teaching you to be an emotional person or whatever. It's just like, how do I make sure you survive out in the world and that you're going to make money? I feel like it was really the baby boomers who were the first generation to start to reject a lot of that and start to say, like, beating your kids into submission, we're not so sure we're good with that, right? Like, it happened to us, and we're starting to say the world's a lot different than it used to be. Like, I actually want to create humans who maybe are a little more caring. I definitely feel like Gen X has been the generation that has really changed that. Like, I feel like it's the first generation where you see this real dramatic shift from this more authoritarian style of parenting. Like, it's been degrading over time, but I feel like Gen X really took it to that next level because we were all latchkey kids and felt so like left alone because our moms were the first ones to really go out in the workforce and all of that, that it was like, now I want to be my kid's best friend. I want to take care of them. I want them to love me. I want to love them, like this. And I think in some ways we've gone a little too overboard, perhaps. Yeah. That is a discussion I see, especially among white women. It's really interesting, though. I just had a conversation yesterday inside of a space that's for white folks where we're dealing with our own sort of racial reckoning. And one of the things, two things that came up. One, we can go down either path. One's related to what we're talking about. One was about the protests earlier. One woman brought up, she noticed, and she was in Atlanta at the protests. Obviously, it's like a less white metropolitan area than most area, like some of the bigger cities in the country. I think it's probably one of the more Black metropolitan areas, right?
Yeah, Black and Latino for sure.
Yeah, and she Asian. Was like, I noticed it was mostly white people at this protest. And I said, that's because it's ours to fix. And that was sort of the consensus. But there was an interesting, like, that's a discussion potentially of like, whose job is this to show up and all of that. And then the other piece that we talked about was kind of like difference, white parenting versus other parenting. And it's like white culture of parenting, which obviously I center in my own understanding because that is the experience I had and have. And remembering and realizing parenting looks very different by culture as well. Like what I am talking about here, all this lineage I just discussed was all white. That's my reference. So I want to say that and then realize like parenting also looks very different by culture.
Yeah.
So I don't know, either of those paths interest you or both. But.
Yeah. I mean, they both interest me. Two roads diverged in a wood. So the podcast is Trash Tuesday podcast. Okay. I looked it up real quick. So I just wanted to make that announcement. So if somebody wants to look it up. No, I had some people ask me if I was going to go to the protest, and the answer was no. And part of it is because this is white people's problem to fix, but also part of it is like it's not safe for people like me to go. So like, I'm not white. My wife isn't white. We both have disabilities. We're both queer.
So you have a wife. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's the expectation that non-white, able-bodied, straight, appearing or straight, what's the word I'm looking for? Not performative. Straight passing. Yeah. Cisgendered people show up to protests like this, while some people have made that choice, right? Like, I think that's, if you're not white, then at the individual level, you have to make that choice for yourself. If you're white, it's about the communal aspect of it, right? Like, it's about making sure that there are enough people there to make a statement. And so, I think when when I was asked if I was going to go by some white people, a part of me was also just offended because I was just like, why would you ask me that?
Interesting.
Like,
I totally thought you were going to go another direction. I thought you were going to say part of me was feeling bad that I was going to be like, no. So I think it's so interesting though, this white bodied person, that's where my brain goes, of course, guilt. I mean, we white people love guilt. So I immediately like going to like, I bet she was feeling like, people are going to judge me. I feel bad. No, it's the opposite, which I love for you. I love that. But just so funny, the different perspective. Cause I was like, for sure, you're going to say guilt.
I think a different version of myself would have felt bad. Like I think if I was younger, if I was still in like my people pleasing era, if I was
if you'd done less of this unlearning work that you
if I was still deeply entrenched in a lot of like performative type of like showing up identity, I would feel bad. No, I'm 43 years old. I've seen enough bullshit. I've dealt with enough bullshit. I don't feel bad about taking or asking. Sometimes I feel bad about asking for what I need still. That's a whole different conversation. But I don't feel bad about,
because I just did that. But.
I don't feel bad about taking what I need.
I love that.
And there's a difference between taking and asking. Like those are the context for those two scenarios it can be vastly different.
Receiving versus asking, right?
Right.
Like, for sure.
Right. And so, so there was a part of me that was like, have you seen me? Like,
what part of this says I
Right, right. Not that I thought that they expected me to be there. And so like a part of me had to be like, they're just making conversation, Ty. Like chill the fuck out. Like, you know, like they're just
Well, did you feel any judgment when you said no?
no, I didn't feel any judgment at all. And that's how I knew I was talking to the right people, right?
Well, good, because there is this part of me too that's like, I would have asked you. Only because I just know that you care, you're passionate about change, and it's this big thing that's happening. And I wouldn't have expected you to go, or I wouldn't have, and again, wouldn't have judged you, but I feels reassuring to know, like, if I had asked, although you might have thought, bitch, why are you asking me that? You wouldn't have been like, you wouldn't have said, bitch, why are you asking me that?
No.
You would have at least understood.
I wouldn't have said that. Unless we were like face to face and like 2 margaritas in, I might have.
And you could say it in the way that I would receive it.
Right. But
which you could say that over Zoom, and I would probably, as long as I can tell you, or was saying it in the way that we just said. Well, it's interesting because I saw the people that we were talking with. There was also white people who were wrestling with their own issues. That was challenging for me sitting on the call to not get into this place of, and this is white supremacist shit too, right? Like the, not that I'm better than you, but like some amount of judging you for like even having the question of your own safety. Because I want to be like, you know, there's that part of me that's just like, fuck off. You're white. You have all this privilege. You need to use it. You should show up. I did it. Millions of people did it. Like, get over yourself, right? Like, that's where my brain goes in that same kind of way of you being like, who are you to, like, why would you even ask me that? And then I have to check myself to be like, wait a minute. Like, that's also just me sort of these expectations that I'm putting on to people that like, you're not doing it right. You're not doing it well enough. I'm doing it better. And that's no better. It really isn't. Like, I need to give them that space to wrestle. Like, they're at a different point on their journey of unlearning and relearning. And also, like, one was talking about, like, I'm in Florida. I was worried. She's like, I know there's privilege inside of that. And yet I allowed that fear to stop me from going. And later I had all this guilt that I didn't, because everything was fine at the protest. I could have been there. And I like, that immediate reaction shows up. And then I was able to soften and share with her. I'm like, your fear wasn't unfounded, because things did happen at protests.
Especially that Florida sheriff who was like, if we see a brick, we're gonna shoot you. If we do that, if you do this, we're gonna kill you. It's like, dude, people that were
there were cars that were rammed into the protests, and obviously most notably was the one in Salt Lake City where it was not the Trumpers that showed up, not MAGA doing it, but the 5051 peacekeepers who ended up shooting, no surprise here, a Samoan man and a Venezuelan man, neither of whom were white presenting, right? And they were the 2 folks who ended up getting shot. One died, the Samoan man, who was apparently on Project Runway.
I hadn't heard about that.
Yeah, but so while there was part of me that's just like, get over it, and like me thinking like, I'm bringing my kid because I want him to know, like I even shared that, like I want him to learn, like we don't back down or whatever. And I could feel my righteousness coming up.
Yeah.
And I have to watch that too, right? Like all these sides of these equations, we have to watch for that stuff that comes up where, like, in the same way, I think I could totally feel you being like, I shouldn't have to be there and don't ask me. Like, I think there's also that piece of like, can we soften into it to understand asking? And then my same way of like, you should go get over yourself, your privilege, to soften and say, well, it's not like their fears were fully unfounded. And maybe they're in a different place, and they have, and maybe we have different degrees of privilege and all sorts of things that.
And I think that's what it boiled down to. It was like, I had to remember who I was talking to and who was asking me. And it's like, this isn't a stranger on the street asking me if I'm showing up. This is someone I consider a friend, you know, like a far away friend, but like someone that I respect, someone that I have a level of care for, who has a level of care for me, who has a level of respect for me. Like, they're not trying to wound me or like
a MAGA person being like, why are you going then you care so much?
So there's just that instant reaction. And I think, like you said, that does boil down to a lot of just like internalized white supremacy that shows up as self-righteousness, the right way to show up or the right way to do things, and discounting or invalidating the individual journey. Like, I think it's different when it's like if it was a white person who was always like, well, I'm afraid, like every single fucking time they were afraid, it's like, okay, this is a habit. You're just
exactly. I had to remember I was in a room of white people who are there because they have paid money to be in space. It's called unpacking whiteness. Like, we are, this is a group of people who are on the journey. Doesn't mean we're all in the same place on the journey. And I know, because the way my reaction shows up, I still have work to do on the journey, right?
Yeah.
So who am I to be judging other people who aren't where I'm at on the journey?
Yeah.
But I know they're on the journey.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of what you're saying is like, if I know you're on the journey, that's what matters. But those people who are always like, no, I'm always there. They're probably not even on the journey.
Yeah. No, they're not. They're just there in a performative way, right?
Because it reminds me of my, a person in my husband's family. I won't say who, so that they can't identify this if they hear it. But back when Michael Brown,
know who you are.
Oh, you know, when Michael Brown was killed in Ferguson, which we lived a half a mile from where he was killed when the fires were going on during the protests, we saw them. It was literally in our front yard. Like it was there. I could see it. She lived 25 miles away in the suburb. She was freaking out. In an all white neighborhood. And she was in total panic mode about what's going to happen. And oh my God, and I'm so afraid. And we were like, we're sitting here watching. I can see the fires down the road. Yeah. And I'm not at your level of panic. What the? Yeah. So those kinds of things are like, don't even come at me with that stuff. That's the kind of person where I have a lot less ability to have that
sympathy and that empathy. Yeah, definitely. I think also just having I always go back to just trying to stay curious, because curiosity kind of keeps judgment at bay.
Yeah.
And so if I'm feeling, and I've said this before on the podcast, I'm an incredibly judgy person. I'm sorry. I know that about myself, and I try to be better. I'm constantly trying to be better, but I am an incredibly judgy person. And so my tactic for myself has always been to try to remain as curious as possible in order to keep that judgmental side of myself in check. Because if I'm asking questions, I don't have time to be judgmental. I don't have the headspace to be judgmental. And that allows me to see the other person as a person and not as an enemy or someone to dissect or an encounter to be superior in or for
me to fix.
Right.
My project, I'll make you better, right?
Yeah.
Right. When you're asking, and to be fair, that person didn't say it to me, so I wasn't engaged in that conversation. They said it to my husband, so I didn't hear about it. But if I had been in person with that person at the time, I think I would have been incredibly judgy. I would like to think that now maybe I could have that internal fortitude to actually be inquisitive and just say, well, what is it about it that has you afraid? You're pretty far away. Yeah. What's the fear about? And see what that conversation could lead to. But if I'm being fully honest, even now, I have a hard time because, just knowing the person.
The person, their biases.
Voting patterns.
Yes. It's definitely harder to stay in that kind of neutral ground when there's context. But I think that context is what also allows you to let yourself off the hook and be like, no, this person is just.
Yeah, to remember that not even every fight, but just every conversation isn't mine to have.
Right, exactly. And that's the other thing. It's like, I don't have the energy for this. So just go do you. Just
honor your capacity.
Go stay in your panic mode, stay in your anxiety, stay in your fear. I'm going to be over here doing my thing. Just leave that out of my space because I don't have the energy for this. So,
well, when I think about people of color participating or not in those rallies, I can also feel this feeling of I could see where some white folks, I don't think people who are on the journey necessarily, but those who might have been there in a more performative way or are just this is just beginning of their reckoning. Maybe they're just having their reckoning. And you know what? I have to remember not to judge that because mine started with Michael Brown, but there were many people who started long before that, right?
Yeah. Everybody
just because I was pre-George Floyd, doesn't mean that I'm better than, right? And that feeling can get in there. But anyway, for those people, I could see someone who might be like, well, I'm out here because I want to protect immigrants or whatever, and they're not here. They don't care, right? I could sense that.
Oh, you mean the immigrants that are being disappeared by ICE?
Right. You know what I mean? But people who are why is this all white folks showing up? Are we the only ones who care? I could see how there might be that sentiment of as a thing that someone might tap into. And even more damaging is the people on the other side of that equation who might use that as ammunition to be they don't even care. They don't even, and I just think it's important if there's anyone who might be in that place, just to understand that piece that we're talking about. It's first of all, it's our fight. And secondly, also we have to remember privilege in all things and safety and where, again, if you're worried about ICE getting you right now, you are in hiding as you should.
You're trying not to be in public.
Yeah.
I have been telling my wife and I have been trying to do this, and we've been telling a lot of our friends who are non-white, like, don't go anywhere alone in public. Like, make sure there's always somebody with you, because outside of ICE, right? Like, not all of my friends are immigrants, but like outside of that, just like people are out here just killing people. Like, there was a fucking political assassination.
Right.
And I think it also just goes back to what we were talking about earlier about like white supremacy says that there's one right way to show up. And just because people weren't showing up at the protests doesn't mean that they weren't showing up in other ways.
Yes. Someone brought up in that conversation yesterday, Deepa Iyer, social change map, and all, because she was feeling some of that guilt that comes up of not participating and letting the fear win and all. And then she was like, and also I try to remember that may be true in this instance that I let the fear win or whatever, but these are all the, I show up in all these other ways. Yeah. I am showing up. I'm doing all of these other things. Her very work is grounded in a lot of this sort of activism work. So it was like, yeah, we don't all have to show up on the front lines. That those frontline responders, yes, it's important, but it's not the only way. And while I think it was powerful that there were so many millions of people that came out, and I do think that that's really important. I think just for the public dialogue, the media reception, all that, it's really important. And it's only one tiny thing. And while it does make a difference, it's not the
only thing.
Yeah. And it's not going to be, in and of itself, is not the thing to change things.
Right. It's more of a statement, right? It's more of an act of solidarity for the people who can't show up to be encouraged and to be affirmed and validated in the ways that they are showing up. And so maybe there weren't that many Latino people there, but maybe they were giving rides to people, feeding people. You know what I mean? Like there's so many ways to show up outside of just,
and I think it's important for those Latino people to see that. Right? Like, I don't know. I'm curious on your perspective. Does that do anything for you, seeing the millions of white folks that are out there protesting in a way? You know what? I go back to the pussy hats. I go back to the Women's March and all the ways that fell short and was problematic. And then I think that's also part of what comes up inside of some of these liberal conversations around, like, I understand why this is our fight, why people of color don't need to be there, in many ways shouldn't be there. And does that messaging feed into, again, some of those same problematic issues of like exclusion and separation? And so I'm curious about your perspective on that. Like, do you receive it? This is just you. I'm not asking you to be representing anybody, but just for you, like, did you receive that in a way of like, it feels good to know there are this many people out there that are, or does it feel anyway to you, again, sort of like this performative pussy hat stuff?
It's both and, right?
As much as Mike.
Yeah. There's definitely a part of me that feels good. And I'm just like, oh, because every time you hear, oh, we're doing mass protests, it's like, how's it really going to be? Like, who's really going to show up? Like, are white people going to like do the thing? Are they actually going to do the thing? And so there is a part of me that it felt good to see how far reaching that day of protest was, how many people were. Like, I saw something, I think it was like in Maine or Massachusetts, where it was like a children's parade, like a children's protest. And it was beautiful. Like, it's beautiful to see things like that. But there's the cynical, judgy side of me that's like, okay, what happens after? Like, what are you doing when you go home? Are you calling out your father-in-law? Like, things like that. And so it's both and.
I brought that up yesterday too, that part of like, you go to these protests and then you see the people taking their selfies and filming and then like putting it on social media. And there is that party that's like the skeptic in me too. And listen, I took a picture of my kid. I sent it to you because I just was so proud of him for his first protest, but I didn't really put that out. But I did, like, there is this part of me, and this is what we talked about, the stories that we can tell ourselves of like, I'm documenting this because I want the world to see how many people are out. And there is that part of me that is truthful. I wanted to make sure that like, hey, people see, like, even in this red district, which I contextualize it like this is a 60-40 Trump district, there's thousands of people out here. And for the most part, we've been getting a lot of honks and like, it's been really positive, right? Only a few people kind of being threatening or whatever. And wanting to have that be a part of the larger conversation, right? As we're trying to tell this story, I want to contribute to that narrative. But then if I get real honest with myself, how much of that is also, I want the credit, right? Like, I want people to know I was there. Gold star, pat on my back, right? Like, and you see everyone sort of doing that. And there's no way, I don't think, to fully parse that out for yourself and get to a place where you can fully if you can get fully honest to say like, no, it was 100% the documentation, nothing to do with the like, because that praise shit, that's all still there. That's all part of the white supremacy culture.
It's okay if you got a praise kink.
Yeah, right. Like, so it's just hard of like, yeah, I see that. And I also, the cynical part of me is like, are you here because you care or because you want the selfie and you want the gold star?
Yeah. And
And
the answer is both.
exactly. And the answer is, can it not? For most people, I'm sure there are people for whom it's only the gold star, right?
Yeah.
And there's probably people for whom it's not at all about the gold star. There was plenty of like folks that I saw who didn't have their cameras out at all, right? Especially a lot of the older folks. They were there because I think their Medicare is threatened. So again, even that, it's still about them, probably. But yeah, like I don't think you can fully separate that out, right?
You can't. You can't. Because it's part of being human, right?
Right?
To be known, to be seen, to be recognized for who you are and what your needs are. And that's totally fucking okay. And I think when we get into conversations about, well, are you doing it because you want to be recognized? Like, obviously, if it's a habitual pattern and there's no depth, if nothing happens after the fact, then that's a different story. If it's a person or a group of people who are showing up and are posting and being, you know, really vocal about what they're doing, but they are also doing other things, like, that's fine. Like, again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Like, white supremacy says that there's one right way to do things. And if we want to fully disentangle ourselves from that idea, that tenet of white supremacy, then we have to be okay with people showing up and wanting the recognition for showing up.
Yeah. Or whatever brought them to the journey, because that judgy part of me shows up where it's like, oh, you care now that it's your Medicaid or Medicare that's affected potentially, or your Social Security, but like you didn't care before that. And my own awakening started when it was outside my door.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should have been before that,
whatever
right?
the entry point is, you're here now. You're here
Yeah.
now. So how do we come together?
Mm-hmm.
It may not have been the best way to get you here, but you're here now. You're here
Right.
now.
And that's where I think the left can cannibalize itself by getting so righteous in like, well, that's not a good enough reason, or you're not doing it right, or you came to this late so you don't count, or whatever.
What is a good enough reason?
Right. And the millions of ways that we do that instead of saying exactly that, like, you know what? We're here now. This is where we are. We're all here. I'm glad you're here. I don't care if it took you until yesterday to get here. You're here now. And like, let's march forward together. And if we could have more of that, and I'm saying it feels so Pollyanna that I'm like, and yet I do really believe it.
Yeah. 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 I believe it too. And I think, I don't care how people get here. I care what they do once they get here. Yeah. Once they're here, what do you do now? Like, how are you tying up your liberation with mine? How are you making those connections? How are you embedding yourself into community, right? Because if you get here and it stays about you, then we have a fucking problem.
Yeah. Well, and like going back to the parenting, it's like, okay, I'm here, but if I'm not integrating it into my parenting, if I'm not integrating it into my work, and I'm not saying you have to do it all at once, because for me, that's been a process. Like it started on this personal journey because it felt like it was outside my door, and this awakening of like all the ways I had fallen short. I had to deal with all the guilt and all the bullshit, right? And then eventually it moved towards, okay, now I can't just keep my work and personal life separate. Like, that's right. This has to be a part of my work as well. And what does that look like? And that became its own long journey. And then, you know, and more recently, as my kid gets older and is starting to understand more and can have more complex questions and conversations, I am more and more beginning to get to that place of examining my parenting and still recognizing all the ways I'm falling short there. And that's going to be a journey. And so like, I think it is your entry point doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how long it took, all of that. And like, it matters what you do moving forward, but also knowing that will continue to be a journey, and that expectation that you're supposed to like immediately
get it perfect
in all the places and all the ways, like that's not real either. That's that same perfectionism. So like, we also have to give some permission and space to say, okay, you're here. You have the issue you care about. You're doing your thing. I want to see growth, but I also don't expect it to be like, you're going to get it all tomorrow. Cause I know I have so much to do still.
Oh my God. So much.
Right. We all do.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, anything else?
No,
I'm in a chaos home right now with kids starting to infiltrate my space. So I probably need to make sure they don't kill each other.
Yeah. No, I think this was a good conversation. And if we're coming up on our 1 year.
Oh, I know.
So
I don't know when that is. I feel like we may already be there and we just haven't done anything of it.
Yeah.
But
I mean, we've definitely had more than 52 episodes.
Yeah. So we need to have a special, like one of these, maybe our 55th or 6th. I think we might be at our 55th, maybe our 60th. We should do something. We should do something. I don't know what. Talk about our favorite moments. I don't know. Talk about the plans for the future. I don't know. We'll think of something.
We'll think of something.
Yeah. Yeah.
It'll probably be messy.
I'm sure. This feels like I'm going to have to do some editing on this, I think, because it was too messy. I like the ones where I don't have to do really anything.
Let's just raw dog it.
Oh no, I feel a little too vulnerable putting out all of the chaos, but this has been great. I had something I wanted to say to you and now I've lost it. So that's okay. I'm sure it'll be fine.
All right.
Before you say 50. Whatever. Go ahead.
And I was just say I have co-working for the coaches circle in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I won't be able to be there because I'm taking 6
kids to the pool.
I think I would rather do the co-working. I wish the kids were going to the pool with some other
switch
adult.
Places?
You want to take 6 9-year-olds to the pool?
No.
It'll be okay. I'm actually in my swimsuit too, which I don't, that's going to be.
It'll be nice.
It's going to be great. And that lovely mom who just dropped off a kid brought a whole thing of watermelon. How nice was that?
Oh, perfect.
It takes the village, right? And it is lovely. As much as I don't like being social and I don't like other parents and I don't like other people's kids and all that stuff, like it has been lovely as he's getting older to start to cultivate some community around parenting and finding those with whom we kind of have some shared beliefs and shared parenting styles and all of that. And then developing some of that trust to be able to like let them drop off their kids or drop my kid off. And that has been really nice. So try to find the parts of it that are but I will
try to have as much fun as you can.
I will need a serious nap this afternoon.
Yeah.
Thankfully, my kid has baseball practice with my husband after the pool. So while they're done,
you can decompress.
I will be decompressing, probably with some great British drama. All right.
Got it.
Well, thank you for doing this and all of the chaos today and always.
Today and always.
All right. Bye. Thanks for listening to Messy Liberation.
Will you please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen?
I know people say that all the time. And if you're like me, often you just go on to the next podcast. But truly, taking that moment to do that will really help us reach a wider audience.
Thank you so much for your support and for listening today.
Until next time.